The great hall of the galactic summit shimmered under glowing blue lights. Leaders from across the stars had gathered, tall beings with scales, feathers, and metallic skin. They filled the room with loud voices, speaking in different tones and languages. But they all had one thing in common. They laughed when Earth's ambassador spoke. Ambassador Clark stood calmly at the center podium. He was not a soldier, not a warrior, just a man in a neat gray suit. His voice was steady, soft and full of hope. Humanity believes in peace and unity, in building a future together, he said. The room echoed with mocking chuckles. A feathered alien from the Varnak Council flapped his wings and spoke loudly. Peace? That is your strength? You're too soft for this galaxy, human? You do not sing songs when fleets clash in the stars? Another alien, tall and sharp, with metal spikes on his shoulders, hissed, Words do not stop invasions. Only power does. More laughter followed. They saw humans as weak, always talking, always hoping, never striking first. A few diplomats smiled politely, but most looked away, uninterested. Suddenly, the large doors at the back of the chamber creaked open. The room quieted. A single figure entered slowly, boots tapping against the polished floor. He wore no fancy uniform, no glowing armor, just a black coat, old and heavy, dust on the shoulders. His face was scarred, weathered by years and war. A deep line ran from above his left eye down to his cheek. His hair was gray at the edges. His eyes, however, were sharp and cold, like they had seen too much. No one recognized him at first. The alien leaders turned, confused. The man walked straight to the ambassador and stood beside him, saying nothing. Ambassador Clark nodded, stepping aside. This, he said quietly, is Commander Reeve. The name meant nothing to most of the aliens, but a few older ones, those who studied ancient conflicts, went silent. One metallic creature whispered to another, He's still alive? Reeve looked around the room. He didn't bow, didn't smile. He just stood still. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but strong. I heard what you said, he began. That humans are soft, that we use words, that we are weak. His gaze moved slowly from one alien leader to another. You're right. We do use words. We try to solve problems with peace. We don't want war. He paused, and the silence in the room became heavy. But I was there, he continued, when peace failed. The room when the stars screamed. The room was frozen. No one laughed. Now, a nervous diplomat adjusted his collar. A giant lizard-like being shifted in his seat. What do you mean? One voice asked carefully. Reeve's eyes narrowed. There's a reason some species are no longer here. A reason the Trehall are only found in old data files and burned-out systems. You mock soft words, but you forget what happens when soft words are ignored. The room felt colder. A few delegates checked their consoles, searching the name Trehall. Nothing came up, just red warnings and locked files. Say anything more. He turned and walked to the last empty seat at the summit table. It was a plain chair, untouched and forgotten. He sat down slowly, placing his hands on the table. For a moment no one spoke, no one dared. Ambassador Clark stepped forward again. Let the record show, he said calmly, that Earth has accepted its seat at the summit. And from the shadows of forgotten wars, an old ghost had returned. Not with weapons, but with a truth that would shake the stars. The air inside the galactic summit remained tense long after Reeve sat down. The laughter was gone. So were the jokes. A cold silence rested over the chamber, like the moment before a storm. Some tried to brush it off, calling Reeve just another human trying to scare the room. But deep down, many of them felt something. They hadn't felt in a long time fear. A bold ambassador from the Zero species, the tall being with glowing blue skin, finally broke the silence. You spoke of the stars screaming, she said carefully. But the records show no such event. The Trehall are just a myth. Reeve looked up, his face unreadable. That's what you were told, he replied, because the truth was buried, covered in silence, hidden for your safety. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it that made even the strongest warriors lean in. Reeve leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table. Oh, you want to know what happened? Fine, I'll tell you. But don't ask for the truth if you're not ready to carry it. He stood again, his shadow stretching across the polished floor. Years ago, long before Earth joined your galactic union, we made contact with a race called the Trahal. They were old, powerful, a warrior race with ships like moving mountains and minds that bent gravity. They didn't believe in peace, only conquest. He took a slow breath. They found one of our early colonies, Vesta 9. It wasn't a military base, just families, scientists, children. His voice cracked slightly, then returned to steady, calm. We sent messages, pleaded for dialogue, for peace. We told them we didn't want war. They responded by turning the colony into fire. A message, they said. A warning. Many alien leaders leaned back, disturbed. The Trahal were never spoken of in Union history, but now questions stirred. Why were the records so empty?
Ow.
Why were there no remains, no survivors? Reeve continued. We asked the Galactic Union for help. Your laws said you protect peaceful species, but Earth wasn't a member yet, so we got silence. We were alone. He looked directly at the Zerl ambassador. So we did what we had to do. We sent a response. Not from politicians, not from diplomats, but from warriors who had seen too much. The room darkened as the lights dimmed slightly, and a hologram lit up at the center. It showed a shattered world, floating in pieces. Ship debris orbited it like broken teeth. Gasps filled the chamber. That was the Trall's homeworld, Reeve said coldly. They called themselves the Unbreakable, the Unstoppable. But they made one mistake. They believed kindness was weakness. They saw our soft words and thought we didn't have teeth. One delegate from a reptilian race stood up, confused and disturbed. This isn't possible. You have no record of this event. Reeve's eyes didn't move. You don't? Because we erased them. Every ship, every outpost, every satellite. We didn't leave anything behind, not out of hate, but because we wanted to send a clear message. Never again. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't from confusion. It was from realization. The humans, the species they mocked as soft and peaceful, had done what no other race had. They had wiped a terrifying empire from existence without fanfare, without glory, and without needing anyone's permission. Reeve sat down again, his voice now quiet. We don't enjoy war. We never wanted it. We were forced to change. And once we did, even the stars remembered our name. Not a single delegate spoke. And in that quiet chamber, the image of the shattered Trial world slowly faded, but the fear in the room did not. A day had passed since Reeve spoke, but the weight of his words still pressed down on the galactic summit. Conversations became whispers. Eyes shifted nervously whenever the human veteran moved. Even the boldest species now sat a little straighter. When addressing the Earth delegation, still, many leaders could not accept the truth. A few claimed Reeve was bluffing, using fear to secure respect. But deep down, a question echoed through every mind. If he was lying, why were the Trahal truly gone? Reeve stood again on the second day, not because anyone invited him, but because silence returned when he rose. He didn't need permission. The room belonged to him now. His voice, once cold, now carried a deeper tone. Not anger, but something. Heavier memory? They didn't stop with Vestanine, he said, facing the room. The Trahal sent a fleet toward Earth. 7 dreadnoughts. Hundreds of warships. No warning, no declaration, just destruction. The delegates leaned forward. We tried one last time to stop it, Reeve continued. One last message. We begged them to turn back. We promised we wouldn't fight. Do you know what they did? He pointed toward the center of the room. A second hologram flickered to life. It showed a human communication pod floating in space, torn apart. With a symbol burned into its wreckage, the Trahal mark for submission rejected. They wanted us to kneel, Reeve said. So we stood up. This time, he didn't. Show broken planets. Instead, he showed people. Images of human soldiers standing silently in dark corridors. Men and women with strange black suits and glowing veins, their faces calm, but their eyes hollow. These weren't heroes, Reeves said. They were made for one purpose, to end a war we never wanted. He looked at the crowd. Think humans love peace because we're soft. But the truth is simpler. We know what we become when peace dies. Gasps echoed again, as one alien leader from the Urshan race recognized something in the footage. He stood up, pale. It's that symbol, on their suits. I've seen it in ancient security warnings, locked files from forgotten systems. Reeve gave a single nod. Project Revenant? He didn't explain much. But he didn't need to. The name alone sent ripples across the chamber. Revenants weren't soldiers, he said. They were the dead. Brought back with one mission: protect Earth, no matter the cost. Another ambassador whispered, "That's impossible." That technology, Reeve cut in, costs us more than you'll ever understand. The mind rejects what it once was. They never came back fully. They died protecting our world, then died again, destroying the enemy. His voice lowered. Some of them are still out there. We don't call them home. Don't know if they remember how. The room sat in complete silence. Galactic Council's oldest member, a being known only as the Archivist, stood slowly. His body was like drifting smoke inside a glass shell. I remember the Trahal, he said quietly. Long ago, they came to our edge of space. We paid them to leave. We were cowards. He looked toward Reeve. You didn't run. Reeve looked back, his eyes soft for the first time. We didn't have anywhere to run. The Archivist nodded. Then, perhaps, it is time we stop laughing at soft words and begin listening to those who paid the price for silence. As the session closed, no one laughed at the humans. Not anymore. Reeve walked out of the hall quietly, his steps echoing down the polished floor. The images remained in their minds, not of ships, not of weapons, but of human faces that chose peace until peace was no longer an option. The message was clear. They mocked soft words, but they had forgotten what came after. The next summit. Session opened with silence. No chatter, no mocking voices, no laughter. Every delegate's eyes watched the human section closely, not out of suspicion now, but out of caution. Reeve had not returned that morning. Only Ambassador Clark sat at the table, his expression calm, but his silence louder than words. The fear of the unknown now hung like a shadow over the entire chamber. Suddenly the chamber doors opened once more, and Reeve entered slower than before. But something was different. His coat was gone. He wore a plain dark uniform marked only with a small silver emblem, a triangle with a broken star inside. Many in the room didn't recognize it, but the Archivist did. Stood immediately, trembling slightly. That mark, no, that program was destroyed. Reeve nodded gently. You destroyed the reports, but not the people. Whispers spread. Across the hall, Reeve took the center once more. He didn't look proud or angry, just tired. His voice, however, was sharper than ever. The Trahal weren't just a military threat. They used psychological warfare. Broadcasts, brain-hacking signals, chemical fear weapons. They attacked the mind. He paused. So we adapted. A new hologram appeared, not of space, battles, but of quiet labs deep under Earth's crust. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and then the experiments. Human brains wired to machines. Memory data transferred, overwritten, erased, restored, failed tests, crying voices, silent screams. They called it ghost mind, Reeve said. We learned how to control fear, not by removing it, but by locking it away forever. He stepped forward, facing the council. You think humanity is emotional, fragile, soft? But you forget what happens when a mind learns to shut off pain, what it becomes. The delegates stared in horror as the next scene played. A revenant, standing still while fire engulfed its body, continuing its mission without a scream. Another walking across a battlefield with 3 limbs gone, finishing its task before collapsing. These aren't soldiers, someone whispered. They're monsters. Reeve's expression hardened. No, they're humans. Kind you created when you turned away, when you let a peaceful species burn. A delegate from the military-heavy Korgit Empire stood angrily. You expect us to believe this was mercy? You made deathless killers? Reeve didn't blink. You're right. And we wish we hadn't. He showed one final memory, a Revenant mission completed, standing alone on a destroyed Trahal base. It looked at the camera, its mouth opened. The voice that came out was broken, barely human. Is it over? The delegates froze. We didn't cheer, Reeve said softly. We didn't celebrate. We buried them. In space. In silence. We made a promise. Never again. The archivist stepped forward slowly, bowing his glass-like body slightly. You created something the galaxy has never seen, not because you were evil, but because no one else stood beside you. Reeve didn't reply. He looked at the others, his voice low. We mock soft words because you've never needed them. You've always had others to bleed for you. But now, you've heard our truth. He turned and began to walk away. But just before exiting, he stopped. Without turning around, he said, "We are still that species that loves peace, that writes poems, builds gardens on moons. But if you ever threaten us again," looked over his shoulder, eyes dark, "just remember the monsters you fear were once men who just wanted to be left alone." And then he was gone. Not a single word followed. Only silence remained, because now the galaxy believed him. Outside the summit chamber, the stars above the Galactic Council station twinkled quietly, unaware of the storm that brewed within. Inside, the delegates remained shaken. For the first time in the summit's long history, no new topics were brought forward, no political games, no debates. The usual pride and arrogance that filled the chamber had vanished, replaced with caution and unease. The humans, once dismissed as dreamers and soft diplomats, had revealed something far deeper, a terrifying, quiet truth. And yet, there were still those who doubted. The Korgit general, thick-skinned and armor-plated, growled across the table. "Words and stories. That's all this is. We've seen no real proof. Anyone can show footage. That could be fiction." Others nodded, eager for any excuse to restore their pride. But Ambassador Clark remained calm. He reached into his coat and placed a small black device on the table. It looked like nothing, a plain cube. He pressed it gently. The air above, the summit table shimmered as a new hologram formed, a live feed. A spaceship appeared, floating in an isolated system far from the Union's main routes. It was orbiting a dead planet, black and cracked like burned bone. The ship was human-made, old and silent. "This," Clark said, "is the graveyard. You wanted proof, so we'll give it to you." Gasps rose across the room. The planet below had no name on Union maps. It had no light, no life, just silence. "This was the final battlefield," Clark continued, "where the Trail Empire was broken, where our revenants made their last stand." The camera zoomed out. An orbit around the planet floated. Hundreds of ship fragments. Some were clearly alien massive Trahal dreadnoughts, cracked in half, their insides burned out.
Oh.
But some fragments were human. "We left this system untouched," Clark said softly.
That is a warning.
"But as a memory, we wanted to forget. But maybe it's time the galaxy remembers." Then something shifted. A second ship entered the frame, small, sleek, and silent. The Council's viewing screens flickered for a moment. Inside the small ship, a figure moved, humanoid, but strange. Its body was covered in black mesh armor. Its movements were mechanical, but its face, even through the distortion, was human. Not quite alive, not quite machine. "Is that?" a delegate whispered. Clark nodded. "One of the last revenants. We never called them home. But they still patrol this system, protecting a battlefield no one visits. They don't know the war ended." Everyone stared as the revenant's ship circled the wreckage. It made no call. It gave no signal. It just watched. Then the feed cut out. No one spoke. The archivist, still shaken, finally broke the silence. You left this behind? Alone? Why? Reeve, who had re-entered without a word, answered from the back of the room. Because we couldn't bring them back. We couldn't fix them. We're heroes. But we made them monsters. The least we could do was give them something to protect. A grave they could watch over. The Corget general, now pale beneath his armor, whispered, "This is not weakness." "No," Reeve said. "This is what strength costs." A long silence followed. Then the ambassador from the Zeril species, once full of laughter and arrogance, stood slowly. "We saw your peace as foolishness, but I see now your peace was a gift. One you gave even after being hurt." Reeve gave a tired smile, just a flicker. It still is. At that moment, the Galactic Council saw humanity not as weak, but as something far more dangerous. A species that tried peace again and again, even after losing everything. A species that held unimaginable power, but kept it buried out of guilt, not fear. They weren't soft. They were choosing to be kind. And that changed everything. The final day of the summit arrived under a heavy sky. The council chamber, once full of pride and loud declarations, now sat in quiet anticipation. No one dared mock the humans anymore. The story had reached them all, from the youngest delegates to the oldest rulers. The tale of the Trahal of Vestanine. Of the revenants guarding a forgotten graveyard in space, it had spread like wildfire across the stars. But one question still remained in every mind, even if none dared to speak it aloud. Why were the humans still so calm? Why, after everything, after surviving alone, after building monsters in silence, after burying the past, were they still offering peace? This time Reeve did not enter first. Clark did. Dressed in the same neat suit, he stood at the center of the summit floor and looked around the room. "We know what you all want," he said simply. "Answers, guarantees. Some of you fear us now. Some of you want alliances. Others simply want us to stay far away." He paused. "And we understand." He stepped aside as Reeve entered once more, slowly, quietly. This time he didn't wear a uniform or any symbol. Just a plain shirt, old boots, and tired eyes. He didn't go to the table. He walked to the center of the chamber and stood alone. Then he spoke. "There was one more thing I never told you," he said. The entire room leaned in. "When the war ended, when the Trahal were gone, Earth celebrated. I didn't. I visited the families of every revenant we lost, one by one. I stood before mothers and fathers, wives and husbands, sons and daughters." He swallowed hard. "I couldn't tell them what really happened. Couldn't explain what we turned their loved ones into. So I just said they died saving us all, and that their memory would never be forgotten." He looked up. "Straight at the leaders of the galaxy. You call us soft. You think our words are weak. But we speak gently because we've seen what happens when we don't. We don't fear war. We fear becoming what we had to become to survive it." His voice grew firmer. "That's why we offer peace. Not because we're afraid of fighting, but because we're the ones who know exactly what it costs." He took a deep breath, then said the words that would echo across the stars. "Earth does not want to rule this galaxy. We don't want control. All we want is to never have to bury another child wrapped in a war they didn't start." Clark stepped forward and handed a small data crystal to the council. "This contains the full history of the Revenant program, the Trahal War, and the cost. We paid. We share it not as a threat, but as a truth." The archivist stood once more. "You came to us with peace, and we mocked you. You answered with truth, and we trembled. But now, I see, you are not soft." Reeve gave a tired smile. "We are just human." As Reeve and Clark turned to leave, a final voice called out, the same Corgat general who had once scoffed at them. He stood slowly, armor creaking, and raised a clenched fist over his chest, a gesture of deep respect in his culture. One by one, other delegates did the same. Even the proudest of species lowered their heads. Number. Vote was needed. Earth's seat at the summit was no longer questioned. It was respected. Outside, the stars remained quiet, but something had changed. The galaxy had seen the truth. And now they knew. Humanity's soft words were not a weakness. They were a warning. And behind every peaceful voice was a silence that could shake the stars. The summit had ended, but its echoes spread far beyond the chamber walls. Across the galaxy, news feeds buzzed with fragments of the story of a forgotten war, a dead empire, and the silent power hidden behind Earth's calm voice. Reeve and Clark had returned to their ship without ceremony. No victory speeches, no celebration. Just the same quiet grace that had unnerved the most powerful species in the universe, orbiting high above the Galactic Council. The ECS Dawnbreaker floated, silently. Reeve sat in a small observation room at the edge of the ship. Stars blinked through the glass, peaceful and still. But his eyes were somewhere else, deep in the past. Clark entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on the table and sat across from him. "They believed you," Clark said softly. Reeve didn't look up. They didn't have a choice. Clark nodded. He told him the truth. That matters. Reeve finally looked up, his voice quiet. They only heard part of it. Clark raised an eyebrow. "There's more." Reeve stared out at the stars. Again, they never asked what happened after the war. After the revenants. After we made peace. Clark leaned in. What had happened? Reeve took a slow breath. "Some of us didn't stop fighting. Not out there and here." He tapped his chest. "When you shut off fear and pain for long enough, something else starts to grow in its place. Some revenants couldn't return to normal life. Others didn't want to, and a few just vanished." Clark sat in silence. "You think they're still out there?" Reeve gave a slow nod. "I don't think. I know." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. Not military, not government-issued. Just a basic transmitter. He placed it on the table, and it flickered to life. A map appeared, dark and full of red markers. These are ghost signals, patterns that match revenant tech, all scattered across uncharted space. Silent. Watching. Clark stared at the map. "Why show me this now?" Reeve leaned forward, voice low. "Because someday someone else will forget. Another empire will rise. Another species will mock." Soft words. "And when that day comes," he pointed at the red signals, "they'll wake up." Clark swallowed hard. Could have told the council this. Reeve shook his head. "They already fear us. But fear isn't what keeps peace. Understanding does." Silence stretched between them. Then Clark finally asked, "So, what now?" Reeve looked out the window once more. "Now we give the galaxy what we always meant to. A hand instead of a fist. Chance to do things better. And if we fail," he looked Clark dead in the eyes, "then those who vanished will finish what we started." Months later, in a distant part of the galaxy, a pirate fleet entered a restricted zone, black space, long abandoned. They laughed at old warnings. They didn't believe in human myths, but as they moved deeper, their systems began to fail. Lights flickered, comms went dark. One by one, their ships stopped responding, and then something moved. No signal. Message. Just a single symbol carved into a drifting hull, a broken star inside a triangle. By the time the Union's patrols arrived, there was nothing left. No wreckage. No bodies. Just silence. And across the galaxy. The story of Earth became legend not just for their power, not just for their past, but for the truth they carried. Peace was their choice, but they were never soft, just chose to be kind. Until someone gave them a reason not to, the stars would never forget again.